throwaway account for obvious reasons. I can't believe I'm even writing this, but here goes. My name is David, I'm 45, and I've been married to my wife Jessica, 42, for 15 years. We have what I thought was a pretty good life, nice house in the suburbs, 2 kids, 12 and 9, and enough money that we don't have to worry. I work a lot, but I always make sure to provide for my family. Jessica and I have had our ups and downs. I never thought it would come to this. She's always been kind of high maintenance and demanding, but I figured that was just how she was. I'm no saint either, I've had a few flings with other women over the years, but they never meant anything. Just scratching an itch, you know. Anyway, a few months ago we hired this new gardener, Eric. He's in his late 20s, really fit, and I guess you could say he's pretty good looking. Jessica seemed to take an immediate liking to him, always finding excuses to go outside and chat with him while he was working. I didn't think much of it at first, I figured she was just being friendly. But then I started noticing little things. She started dressing sexier around the house, even on days when Eric wasn't supposed to come. She was constantly on her phone, giggling and texting like a teenager. And our sex life? Forget it, she always had some excuse for why she wasn't in the mood. I tried to ignore it, telling myself I was just being paranoid. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. My gut was telling me that there was more going on between Jessica and Eric than just friendly conversation. And then, last week, I came home from work early and caught them together. In our bed. I couldn't believe my eyes. I stood there in shock for what felt like an eternity, trying to process what I was seeing. Jessica jumped out of bed, frantically trying to cover herself with a sheet. "David, I can explain," she stammered, her face flushed with guilt and panic. Eric, on the other hand, looked completely unfazed. He casually got out of bed, not even bothering to hide his nakedness, and started getting dressed like nothing had happened. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I felt like I was going to throw up. Finally, I managed to choke out, "How could you do this to me? To our family?" Jessica started crying, saying it was a mistake, that she never meant for it to happen. She begged me to forgive her, said she loved me and our kids more than anything. But even as she spoke, I could see the lies in her eyes. This wasn't some one-time thing. This had been going on for weeks, maybe even months, right under my nose. Eric finished getting dressed and walked past me out of the bedroom without a word. I wanted to punch him, to beat him to a bloody pulp for what he'd done. But I couldn't move. I just stood there, frozen in disbelief and rage. Jessica kept talking, trying to explain, but I wasn't listening anymore. My mind was racing, replaying every moment of the past few months, every red flag I had ignored or explained away. Finally, I snapped out of my daze and told Jessica to shut up. I told her I was going to a hotel for the night, that I needed time to think. She tried to stop me, but I pushed past her and walked out the door. As I drove to the hotel, my shock gave way to anger. How dare she do this to me? After everything I'd done for her, for our family. I thought about all the sacrifices I'd made over the years, the long hours at work, the times I'd forgiven her bitchiness and demanding behavior. And this was how she repaid me. I checked into the hotel and collapsed onto the bed, my head spinning. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to call a divorce lawyer right then and there. But another part of me still loved Jessica, still wanted to believe that we could work through this somehow. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of my shattered world. Little did I know, the worst was yet to come. I woke up the next morning with a pounding headache and a pit in my stomach. For a brief, blissful moment, I thought it had all been a bad dream. But then the memories came flooding back, Jessica in bed with Eric, the lies, the betrayal. Anger coursed through my veins like hot lava. How could she do this to me? To our family? I had given her everything, a beautiful home, a comfortable life, my love and devotion. And this was how she repaid me. By spreading her legs for some young, dumb pretty boy who probably couldn't even spell fidelity. I thought about all the times she had rejected me, claiming she was too tired or not in the mood. All the while, she was probably fantasizing about Eric, maybe even screwing him in our bed while I was at work busting my ass to provide for her. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I punched a pillow, imagining it was Eric's smug face. I wanted to storm over to his place and beat him senseless, to make him feel even a fraction of the pain and humiliation I was feeling. But even more than that, I wanted to hurt Jessica. I wanted her to suffer like I was suffering. I wanted her to feel the gut-wrenching agony of betrayal, the sickening realization that the person you trusted most in the world had stabbed you in the back. I fantasized about all the ways I could get revenge. I could drain our bank accounts and disappear, leaving her penniless and alone. I could post about her infidelity on social media, letting the whole world know what a lying, cheating whore she was. I could even seduce one of her friends, giving her a taste of her own medicine. But as tempting as those options were, I knew they wouldn't really solve anything. They might give me a momentary sense of satisfaction, but they wouldn't erase the pain or repair the damage that had been done. No, I needed to confront this head-on. I needed to look Jessica in the eye and make her face the consequences of her actions. I needed to decide if our marriage was even worth saving at this point. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the rage boiling inside me. I knew I needed to keep my cool, to think rationally and not do anything I would regret later. I checked out of the hotel and started driving home, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. I didn't know what I was going to say to Jessica when I saw her, but I knew one thing for sure, our lives would never be the same again. As I pulled into our driveway, I saw Jessica's car was gone. A new wave of anger and suspicion washed over me. Where the hell was she? Off with Eric again, probably. The nerve of that woman. I stomped into the empty house, slamming the door behind me. That's when I saw the note on the kitchen counter, written in Jessica's familiar loopy handwriting. With trembling hands, I picked it up and started to read. With shaking hands, I unfolded the note from Jessica. As I read her words, my anger burned hotter with every line. David. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. The truth is, I haven't been happy in our marriage for a long time. You're always working, always putting your job before your family. I've felt neglected and unloved for years. Eric makes me feel alive again. He sees me, he appreciates me, in a way you never have. What we have is real. I never meant to hurt you, but I can't deny my feelings any longer. I've taken the kids and gone to stay with my sister for a while. I think it's best if we take some time apart to figure out what we really want. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me someday. Jessica. I crumpled the note in my fist, seeing red. How dare she try to turn this around on me? I had given everything to this marriage, to our family. I worked my ass off to give her the life she wanted, and this was the thanks I got. And she had the nerve to take my kids. Over my dead body. Those were my children, and no two-bit gardener was going to play daddy to them. I grabbed my phone and dialed Jessica's number, my hands shaking with rage. It went straight to voicemail. I called again and again, but she wouldn't pick up. Next, I called her sister, but apparently Jessica had already warned her not to tell me anything. She claimed she had no idea where Jessica was, but I could hear the lie in her voice. I was seeing red. I wanted to put my fist through a wall, to scream until my lungs gave out. But I knew none of that would bring my wife or my kids back. I had to calm down, to think. Jessica couldn't hide forever. I would find her, and I would bring my children home where they belonged. And if I ever laid eyes on Eric again, I would make damn sure he regretted the day he met my wife. I poured myself a stiff drink and sat down at the kitchen table, my mind racing. I had some calls to make, to my lawyer, to my private investigator buddy. Jessica thought she could just walk away from our life together, but I wasn't about to let that happen. As I sat there stewing, a new thought occurred to me. What if this wasn't really about Eric at all? What if Jessica was using him as an excuse to leave a marriage she was already unhappy in? What if the real problem had been between us all along? I shook my head, dismissing the idea. No, this was all Jessica's fault. She was the one who had betrayed our vows, who had torn our family apart for some young stud. I was the victim here, and I was going to make sure everyone knew it. I downed my drink and reached for the phone. Jessica and Eric had no idea who they were messing with. But they were about to find out. It's been 3 days since Jessica left with the kids, and I feel like I'm losing my mind. I've barely slept or eaten, spending every waking moment trying to track her down. I called her sister again, but she just hung up on me. Same with her parents and her best friend. It's like Jessica has turned everyone against me, painting me as the bad guy in all this. I even tried calling Eric, thinking maybe he would know where she was. But the coward wouldn't even answer his phone. I left a message telling him that if he ever comes near my wife or my kids again, I'll make him wish he was never born. My lawyer hasn't been much help either. He says that since Jessica and I are still legally married, she has every right to take the kids wherever she wants. The only way I can force her to come back is by filing for divorce and getting a court order. Divorce. The word tastes like acid on my tongue. I never thought it would come to this. I always assumed that if things got rough, we would work through it together. But I guess that was just another lie I told myself. My PI buddy has been working around the clock trying to find Jessica, but so far, no luck. It's like she's vanished off the face of the earth. I can't help but wonder if Eric is with her, playing house with my wife and kids. The thought makes my blood boil. I've started having these fantasies about what I would do if I caught them together. In my mind, I see myself beating Eric to a bloody pulp, making him beg for mercy. I see Jessica on her knees, crying and pleading for forgiveness. I know these thoughts are dark and twisted, but I can't help it. I feel like I'm being eaten alive by rage and betrayal. Some days, it's all I can do not to put my fist through a wall. The worst part is the loneliness. Coming home to an empty house every night, knowing my kids are out there somewhere without me. I never realized how much I took for granted just having them around, hearing their laughter, tucking them into bed at night. I keep replaying the last time I saw them, the morning before I caught Jessica with Eric. I was in such a rush to get to work, I barely said goodbye. What if that's the last memory they have of me? Their father, too busy and distracted to even give them a proper hug. I feel like I'm drowning in regret and self-loathing. Maybe Jessica was right. Maybe I really did neglect her and the kids. Maybe if I had been a better husband, a more present father, none of this would have happened. But then I remind myself that I'm not the one who cheated. I'm not the one who broke our vows and destroyed our family. No matter what mistakes I may have made, Jessica is the one who chose to betray me in the worst possible way. I won't let her get away with it. I don't care how long it takes or what I have to do. I will find my wife and I will bring my children home. And God help anyone who tries to stand in my way. It's been 2 weeks since Jessica disappeared with the kids, and I feel like I'm losing my grip on reality. I've barely slept, spending my nights driving around town, checking every hotel and motel, looking for any sign of them. I finally caught a break when my PI buddy managed to track down Jessica's car at a gas station a few towns over. I jumped in my car and sped over there, my heart pounding with a mix of hope and dread. When I arrived, the car was gone. But the attendant remembered seeing a woman and 2 kids matching Jessica's and the kids' descriptions. He said they had been in a hurry, and that the woman seemed nervous, like she was running from someone. I showed him a picture of Eric, asking if he had been with them. The attendant couldn't be sure, but he thought he remembered seeing a man with them, a bit older than the woman. My blood ran cold. So Eric was with her. He had not only stolen my wife, but my children too. The thought of him playing daddy to my kids, taking my place in their lives, made me want to put my fist through something. I spent the next week staking out the town, showing Jessica and Eric's pictures to anyone who would look. A few people thought they recognized them, but the leads always went nowhere. It was like chasing ghosts. Finally, in a moment of desperation, I did something I'm not proud of. I broke into Eric's apartment, looking for any clue to where he and Jessica might have gone. What I found sent me into a tailspin. There were pictures of Eric with another woman, a pretty young blonde. They looked happy, in love. And based on the dates on the photos, it had been going on for years. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. Eric hadn't stolen my wife, he had just been her escape plan. Their affair had probably been going on for God knows how long, right under my nose. Jessica must have been planning to leave me for months, maybe even years. I felt like the world's biggest fool. Here I was, driving myself crazy trying to find my cheating wife and the man I thought she had left me for, when in reality, she had probably left him too. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for Eric. He was just another poor schmuck who had fallen for Jessica's lies and manipulation. Just like I had. But then I remembered my kids. Wherever Jessica had gone, she had taken them with her. And I was still no closer to finding them than I had been 2 weeks ago. I sank to the floor of Eric's apartment, my head in my hands. I felt like I was losing my mind. How had everything gone so wrong? How had I let things get to this point? As I sat there, drowning in self-pity and despair, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. With trembling hands, I opened it. "David, it's Jessica. I'm sorry for everything. I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. But I need your help. I'm in trouble, and I'm scared for the kids. Please, meet me at the old cabin by the lake. And come alone. I'll explain everything, I promise." I stared at the screen, my heart racing. Was this a trick? A trap? Or was it finally the lead I had been praying for? I didn't know. But I did know one thing, I had to find out. For my kid's sake, if not for my own. I took a deep breath and typed out a response. "I'll be there." As I drove up the winding road to the old cabin, my mind was racing with possibilities. What was Jessica doing here? Were the kids with her? Was this all some kind of twisted game? I parked my car and sat for a moment, trying to steady my nerves. I hadn't seen my wife in over 2 weeks, not since I had caught her in bed with Eric. I didn't know what I would say to her, or if I could even stand to look at her without losing my temper. But I had to try, for the kids' sake. They needed their father, now more than ever. I took a deep breath and got out of the car, making my way up the path to the cabin. As I approached, I saw Jessica's car parked out front. My heart leapt into my throat. She was really here. I knocked on the door, my hands shaking. For a moment, there was silence. Then I heard footsteps, and the door creaked open. Jessica stood there, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. But what struck me most was the fear in her eyes. She looked terrified. "David," she whispered. "Thank God you came." Before I could respond, she pulled me inside and shut the door, locking it behind her. I looked around the cabin, my eyes adjusting to the dim light. It was small and sparsely furnished, with just a few pieces of old, worn furniture. "Where are the kids?" I demanded, my voice harsh. "What the hell is going on, Jessica?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "They're safe, David. I promise. But we're in danger. All of us." I stared at her, my mind reeling. "What are you talking about? What kind of danger?" She took a shaky breath, seeming to steel herself. "It's Eric," she said. "He's not who I thought he was. He's involved in some bad things, David. Really bad things. My heart sank. What kind of things? Drugs, she whispered. And worse. He's been using me as a cover, a way to launder money and move product. I didn't realize it at first, but then I started seeing things, hearing things. It got scary, David. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. My wife, the mother of my children, mixed up with a drug dealer. It didn't seem possible. Why didn't you come to me? I asked, my voice breaking. Why did you run? She shook her head, more tears falling. I was afraid, she said. Afraid of what Eric would do if he found out I knew. Afraid of what you would think of me. I panicked, David. I took the kids and ran. I thought I was protecting them. I closed my eyes, trying to process what I was hearing. My wife, my children, in danger because of some lowlife scumbag. It was like a nightmare come to life. Where is Eric now? I asked, my voice low and dangerous. And where are the kids? Jessica swallowed hard. I don't know where Eric is, she said. I've been trying to stay one step ahead of him. As for the kids, they're with my sister. I couldn't risk bringing them here, in case. She trailed off, but I understood. In case Eric found her. In case he tried to use the kids as leverage. I felt a rage building inside me, hot and fierce. This man had not only destroyed my marriage, but put my wife and children in danger. I wanted to find him, to make him pay for what he had done. But first, I had to make sure my family was safe. I took Jessica's hand, looking deep into her eyes. We'll figure this out, I said. Together. I won't let anything happen to you or the kids. I promise. She nodded, a flicker of hope in her eyes. I'm so sorry, David, she whispered. For everything. I never meant for any of this to happen. I squeezed her hand, my anger fading into something softer, sadder. I know, I said. But we can't change the past. All we can do is try to fix the future. We held each other then, two broken people trying to find a way forward. I didn't know what would happen next, or how we would untangle the mess we were in. But I did know one thing, I would do whatever it took to protect my family. Even if it meant facing the darkness head-on. The next few days were a blur of activity and anxiety. Jessica and I spent hours talking, trying to piece together the extent of Eric's criminal activities and the danger we were in. We contacted the police, but without any concrete evidence, there was little they could do. They advised us to lay low and be cautious, but I could see the doubt in their eyes. To them, we were just another domestic dispute, a cheating wife and a jealous husband. But I knew the truth. And I knew that we had to take matters into our own hands. I arranged for Jessica and the kids to stay with my parents, in a town a few hours away. It was far enough that I hoped Eric wouldn't be able to find them, but close enough that I could get to them quickly if needed. Meanwhile, I started digging into Eric's background, using every resource I had. I called in favors from old friends, hired a new private investigator, even reached out to some less than savory characters I had encountered in my line of work. Piece by piece, a picture began to emerge. Eric wasn't just a small-time drug dealer, he was connected to a much larger operation, one with ties to organized crime. He had a history of violence, of making people who crossed him disappear. And based on what Jessica told me, he had become increasingly paranoid and erratic in recent weeks. He was convinced that someone was out to get him, that his business partners were turning on him. I felt a chill run down my spine. If Eric thought Jessica knew something, if he thought she was a threat. I doubled down on my efforts, barely sleeping or eating. I knew I was running out of time. Every moment my wife and kids were out there, they were in danger. Finally, after weeks of dead ends and false leads, I caught a break. One of my contacts came through with a tip. Eric had been spotted at a seedy motel on the outskirts of town, meeting with some known associates. I knew I should go to the police, let them handle it. But I also knew that Eric was slippery, that he had escaped justice before. If I let him get away now, I might never find him again. And so, in the dead of night, I found myself outside that motel, a gun tucked into my waistband. I had never held a gun before, let alone fired one. But I was past the point of caring. All that mattered was ending this nightmare, once and for all. I watched from the shadows as Eric emerged from his room, looking nervous and jumpy. He got into his car and started to pull away. This was it. My one chance. I stepped out into the road, blocking his path. He slammed on the brakes, his eyes going wide when he saw me. "Get out of the car, Eric," I said, my voice hard and cold. "We need to talk." He stared at me for a long moment, his face twisting with rage and fear. Then he reached for something on the seat next to him. A gun. Time seemed to slow down. I saw his finger tighten on the trigger. I heard the crack of the gunshot. I felt the white-hot pain as the bullet tore into my shoulder. And then I was falling, the world spinning around me. I hit the ground hard, my vision blurring. I heard the squeal of tires as Eric peeled out of the parking lot, making his escape. I lay there, blood pooling beneath me, my life ebbing away. And all I could think about was my family, my wife and kids. I had failed them. I had tried to be a hero, and instead I had left them alone and unprotected. As the darkness closed in, I heard sirens in the distance, growing louder. Help was coming, but it was too late. I had played the vigilante, and it had cost me everything. I woke up in a hospital bed, groggy and disoriented. For a moment, I couldn't remember how I had gotten there. Then it all came flooding back, the confrontation with Eric, the gunshot, the searing pain. I tried to sit up, but a gentle hand pushed me back down. It was Jessica, her eyes red and puffy from crying. "Don't try to move," she said softly. "You've been through a lot." I blinked, trying to clear my head. "What happened?" I croaked. "Where's Eric?" Jessica's face darkened. "The police caught him trying to skip town. He's in custody now, facing a whole list of charges. Attempted murder, drug trafficking, money laundering, he's going away for a long time." I closed my eyes, relief washing over me. It was over. My family was safe. And the kids? I asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. Jessica smiled then, a real smile. "They're okay," she said. "They're with your parents. They can't wait to see you." I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. I had come so close to losing everything, my wife, my children, my life. But somehow, against all odds, we had made it through. Over the next few days, as I recovered in the hospital, Jessica and I had a lot of long, difficult conversations. We talked about her affair, about the lies and the betrayal. We talked about my anger, my obsession, my reckless behavior. It wasn't easy. There were moments when I didn't think we would make it, when the hurt and the mistrust seemed too deep to overcome. But slowly, painfully, we began to find our way back to each other. We both knew it would take time. We had broken our marriage, shattered the trust between us. It would take more than a few heartfelt apologies to put the pieces back together. But for the first time in a long time, I had hope. Hope that we could rebuild, hope that we could be a family again. As I held my children in my arms, as I looked into my wife's eyes and saw the love that still burned there, I knew that we had been given a second chance. A chance to start over, to be better, to learn from our mistakes. It wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks and struggles, moments of doubt and fear. But we would face them together, as partners, as equals. Because in the end, that was what mattered most. Not the affair, not the lies, not the anger or the betrayal. What mattered was the love we shared, the commitment we had made to each other and to our family. And as long as we had that, I knew we could weather any storm. It's been a year since everything happened, and I'm happy to report that Jessica and I are doing better than ever. We've been going to counseling, both individually and as a couple, and it's really helped us work through our issues. The kids are thriving, too. They've adjusted to the changes in our family and seem happier and more secure than ever. As for Eric, he ended up taking a plea deal. He's serving a long sentence in prison, and with any luck, he'll never be able to hurt anyone again. Looking back, I realize how close I came to losing everything. My anger and my pride nearly destroyed my family, and it was only through facing the darkest parts of myself that I was able to find my way back to the light. If there's one thing I've learned from this whole ordeal, it's the power of forgiveness. Forgiveness for Jessica, for Eric, but most of all, for myself. We all make mistakes, we all have flaws and weaknesses. What matters is how we choose to learn from them, to grow and to change. I know our journey isn't over. There will be more challenges ahead, more obstacles to overcome. But I also know that as long as Jessica and I are together, as long as we keep choosing love over fear, we can face anything. To anyone out there who might be going through something similar, all I can say is this: don't give up. Don't let your pain and your anger consume you. Reach out for help, lean on the people who love you, and never stop fighting for what matters most. Because in the end, love is always worth fighting for.
Dear listeners, thank you for your incredible support and for tuning into my stories on YouTube. Your enthusiasm and feedback mean the world to me. Stay tuned for more exciting tales. Warm regards.